Your microphone, sir.
We're calling this meeting the order. Item number 1, the roll call. Ms. Malfors, will you read the roll?
President Spear?
Here.
Vice President Osborne?
Here.
Member Gresham?
I'm here.
Member Holcomb?
Here.
Member Causey?
Here.
All are present. There is a quorum.
All right. Item 1.2, we need to make a call for the public hearing on the K-8 remote learning. Dr. Bacher, do you want to explain this item?
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Vice President. Members of the Governing Board and Executive Team. This is our second public hearing as prescribed by law to be able to have you approve our remote learning for this year. We've gone through, at our first hearing, the reason behind it and what it authorizes us to do. Talks about the instructional hours, the minimum instructional hours, and providing more flexibility to school districts to be able to provide remote learning throughout the school year. In regard to our remote learning, I explained at the first hearing about what we are attempting to do in meeting the minimum requirements while giving flexibility to remote learning opportunities, utilizing our same curricula, utilizing our same staff and teachers and materials for that purpose. I went over our daily schedule with 3rd through 8th grade having the same schedule as a brick and mortar. Kindergarten being remote learning being a half-day program, and then being conscientious of the screen time also for our 1st and 2nd graders to be able to provide more asynchronous learning than our brick and mortar schools. Currently, we have 146 students enrolled in MVA with 65 in our remote learning K through 2, so a total of 211. We're looking in mid-September to open it up for the 2nd quarter. There may be a higher demand for that. We ask for everyone's patience as we need to ensure that we have enough staffing to be able to accommodate everyone's needs. And so unless there's any other questions that you have since our last public hearing, I will be requesting that you approve this under an action item later on the agenda.
Questions or comments? Ms.
I just have
Cosby?
a really quick question. So just one thing that occurred to me. So for the 3rd through 8th grade, we have a brick and mortar. Is that correct?
Now,
Schedule?
for the 3rd through 8th grade, what we have is we have our virtual.
Virtual, yeah.
They have the same schedule in terms of the time as the brick and mortar from time to time, but it's spread out in terms of which subject area. But we also have opportunities for those students to be able to have specials at our brick and mortar schools. So we're able to do the core content areas virtually, but have other opportunities for them to be present on a school campus so that they can get that in-person type of social interaction.
So my question is, some parents might choose a virtual learning model for students that need to be somewhere else during the second half of the day because of some activity that they are quite engaged with future plans.
So
how does that sync with?
Sure. Ms. Causey, Dr. Osborne, members of the Governing Board and Executive Team, what we also have designed Madison Virtual Academy for is for ninth signature that accommodates the needs of people who may have children in gymnastics, for instance, or in dance, or who travel extensively, that they're still able to participate remotely through MVA and is still able to have that experience virtually.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Gresham.
Thank you. Yeah, I have a couple, and we've gone over this before, but I just want to clarify for everyone. So if they're choosing for this school year, they can choose NVA if they want to stay online and keep their spot in their school that they're enrolled in, correct? And for the 3rd through 8th, but they'll be at NVA, but then they can go back to their brick and mortar school.
Sure. Ms. Gresham, Dr. Osborne, members of the Governing Board and Executive Team, what we have available is that we hold their spots even if they're open enrolled, that if they're either in our K2 remote learning or the Madison Virtual Academy, they hold their spot that if they choose at the 2nd quarter to go back to their brick and mortar school, they are guaranteed a place there.
Any other questions? Questions from above? Hearing none, I will, do we need a vote to adjourn the meeting, or we just adjourn the special meeting, special hearing?
Just
Other
adjourn.
public,
Oh, I'm sorry. Are there any public comments on the special hearing? And there are not. All right. The public hearing on the K-8 remote learning is adjourned. All right. I'll call to order the regular meeting. Will Ms. Kazi lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'd be honored. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
of the
America,
United States of
to
America,
the republic for
to the
which it
republic
stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Do I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Do I have a second?
Second?
Ms. Gresham, I'm sorry. I have a motion by Ms. Kazi, second by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. The motion has been approved. Now we move on to item 3.1, Superintendent Report. Dr. Baca, will you provide us with your report?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. Today was our 11th day of school, so only 168 more days to go. Our enrollment now has come in at around 5,676, which is still more than at the end of the school year and about where we were, a little less than where we were at the beginning of the school year last year. So it seems to be holding steady. While we initially had that high enrollment, we know that some families are making decisions. We expect some to return at another time. We just will continue to track that enrollment. In regard to COVID-19, we continue to have cases reported. At this time, Madison as a district has a little less than 0.6% cases per students enrolled. With individual schools, it ranges from a low of 0.1% to a high of 1.75%. As you know, we continue to monitor it. Maricopa County really appreciates the way in which we do timely contact tracing. For some of the other school districts, there's a little bit of delay in that reporting, and so they appreciate how on top of it we are. And I thank Dr. Lomeli and Ms. Rodriguez for their continued work on this and communicating to our families. Last year, every school received air purifiers for their front offices, the health offices. We bought larger ones for our cafeterias. We even have them in our media centers. So we want to make sure that people understand we continue to use those. I think there's going to be the desire for us to continue to accept donations for even in the classrooms. We've even redeployed some of our air purifiers from the district office over to number 1 for their choir and band rooms. And we want to look at being able to do that for all the rooms at our schools for that type of school activity. In regard to batch testing, we had planned to do the batch testing starting today. But what we want to do is we want to make sure, and I own needing to communicate a little bit better as to how we will handle quarantines as a result of any positive that comes from a batch testing. What Concentric does have is they have that at-home rapid tests. So if a pooled group tests positive, we would send those rapid tests home with the students that were part of that pool so that they can we can find out who was the one that tested positive and to do the contact tracing accordingly. So we're working on that. We hope to have those in time for Tuesday of next week. We want to be able to ahead of time communicate that out to our parents so they fully understand exactly how that works. And again, my miscommunication in terms of exactly what we would do, but we're happy that Concentric provides those at-home tests. Strategic plan. Our strategic plan design team meeting will be on September 2nd. As a governing board, you know that you'll be meeting on Monday during a study session, and part of that day, you'll be getting an update in regard to the design team. So I want to thank our parents and our staff who have all volunteered their time to be a part of the continuous work that we have with our strategic plan. And then finally, Monday is when we'll be officially doing this, but tonight is Ms. Malfor's last night at a regular governing board meeting as our executive administrative assistant. And so I'm going to reserve my comments on Monday, but for the public who's listening tonight, I just want to thank Ms. Malfor for all of her hard work with Madison. She'll continue to be part of the Madison family as a parent here in Madison. And so we'll see if she has any public comments in the future as a parent. So thank you, Ms. Malfor, for everything. That concludes my report.
Alrighty, we will do governing board member reports, and we'll start with Ms. Spear and then Mr. Holcomb and work our way around. Ms. Spear, anything to report?
Thank you. The only thing that I wanted to say is to say thank you to Ms. Malfors. The amount of work that goes on behind the scenes to not just put on the board meetings, but communications and management and strategy that goes on is not something that the public really appreciates or understands. And one of the reasons things don't go wrong is because Ms. Malfors does such an incredible job. I just want to wish her the best of luck in her new role, and we will miss her greatly. Thank you so much.
All right, Mr. Holcomb.
Thank you. Yes, we could not function without Ms. Malfor. She's not only a consummate professional, but one of the kindest person I know, particularly having to deal with us. I mean, she never gets flustered by us or Dr. Bata, and she's always not only been a true supporter of Madison, an important part of it, but a friend. And that makes it so much better. And I wish you the best, you and your family, now that you're taking advantage of that free tuition at ASU, and I think that's wonderful. The other thing I want to say is I can't express how proud I am of the way our staff, our students, our community has responded. There are disagreements, people have different positions, but it really has been uplifting, I think, the way that the community has come together and work, and the support we have from and the appreciation of the approach we take, even those who disagree with pieces of it, and we're trying to balance. I know there are other districts that it's completely different, both from the administration side, communication of the facts, and from the community side. So I've always been very proud of Madison as an educational institution, but this really brings that pride of the community that we have at all levels. And that's all I have, except that those who haven't gotten your tickets, this next Saturday is the Animaniacs in concert. I mean, what better family thing could you have? And if you come, I will gladly fist bump you, not shake your hand, because I'm going to be there right in the center watching it. I love the Animaniacs. So, anyway, so, Oh, and bring your mask. It's like a bandits convention, looking out in the crowd. But still, do bring your mask and do come and support the Madison. Thank you.
Ms. Gresham.
Thank you. I have a couple of things. First is thank you to Ms. Malafors. She's been super helpful and super professional. Before I was on the board, I was in regular contact with her as a parent as well. So maybe a little too much, but she was very nice. And so I didn't know she was allowed to leave, but I guess we'll let her. I thought you'd be here forever, but thank you for everything. Also, I listened to the podcast we have out that Ms. Rodriguez is doing. She's doing a great job on that. So thank you. It was very good. I enjoyed that. I think that make sure that you parents give permission in Power School for the batch testing. That's very important. If they don't get enough per class, they can't do it at all. There has to be a minimum. So it won't happen at all if we don't have enough people give permission. So that's it. And I'm starting next week. We're going to start cross country. We get to have sports again. So I'm excited for that. Yeah. That's it.
All right, Ms. Kazi.
I want to say thank you to Ms. Malforth. We will miss you. The fact that we have to replace you with a whole company to find a new superintendent, I think, says volumes about the extraordinary work that you have done and have always done while you've been here at the district. And just on a personal note, I want to thank you for all of the patience you've had with me and the kindnesses, the many kindnesses you've shown. So thank you. Wish you the best of luck, and do not be a stranger, please. And I just want to say thank you to our faculty, staff, students, and families who are doing all that they can to make sure that our everyone in our classrooms are remaining safe and in class, in school, which is obviously our goal this year. Thank you.
I also like to thank Ms. Malfour, and I can tell Dr. Bach is starting to get a little sweat along his brow, because the minute you're gone, he knows that his performance will drop precipitously. That's a hidden secret, but you've been a great addition, and I will tell you, having a high-quality person at that position when I was first on the board, the amount of professionals that you brought to it increased the working relationship between the earlier superintendent and this superintendent, and it makes a big difference. So you should be very proud of that. I did try to reach out to ABOR and my friends over there and say, she's not that great, but they weren't buying it. But no, congratulations, and you're setting up your kids in such a great position to go to U of A, and I'm very proud of that. So that's all I have, and we'll move on to the next item. So the next item is call to the public. We have 2 calls to the public. We read the normal admonition for calls to the public. Is that?
Dr. Osborne, that is your prerogative if you choose to. If not, nothing says that you have to.
Okay. Well, it looks like we have 2 regulars who have commented before, so I think they know exactly what the rules. We'll keep you to 3 minutes. And Dr. Snedeker, I think you're up first.
All right.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Dr. Baca and the Madison District Governing Board. Thank you for allowing me yet again the opportunity to address you. My name, as many of you may or may not know, is Dr. Ruth Frank Snedeker. I'm a hospital physician, meaning that I take care of hospitalized COVID patients since the March of 2020. I have children who attend school in the Madison District, only one of whom was able to be vaccinated. I come to you today hopefully to discuss more solutions and maybe a few less terrifying details about COVID-19 than I had the last time I spoke to you. I would like to remind everyone of one very important one, that for every one person that had the original COVID strain, they would infect 1 to 2 others. However, for the Delta variant, this number is 6 to 10. Delta is massively more infectious and proving to be more infectious among children as well. Delta is 200% more transmissible and results in up to 1,000 times higher viral load in the infected individual. The viral load also correlates to the severity of illness. Unmasked children and faculty promote the spread of COVID-19. This has been proven over and over in the data, and that was even before the Delta variant came on the scene. Removing the opt-out. Everyone is masking. Everyone knows that masking is our best mitigation strategy, and we know that the infectivity of the Delta variant, even one unmasked individual in the classroom can infect 10 others. There's no need to offer the opt-out, as the law prohibiting mask mandates cannot be enforced retroactively. Layered mitigation with air purifiers, which we've already heard about, is really exciting. Improved social distancing and other measures that were in place last spring, in addition to the mask mandate, were extremely successful. We ask that the district confirm that the air purifiers are in good working order for the large communal spaces where children will be unmasked. Several parents had voiced concern over a previous conversation that they had not seen the air purifiers in the lunchrooms and didn't know if they were on or up to snuff. There was a recent study that came out actually this week. There's 2 studies that came out that they found that Hepa air cleaners in the classroom could reduce overall air particle transmission by over 90% within 30 minutes. The combination of Hepa cleaners, air cleaners, and universal masking reduced the overall exposure by up to 90%. So masking for everyone and Hepa filters, we can get COVID down with 6 air exchanges an hour down to with a 90% reduction in COVID particles. These findings suggest that portable HEPA air cleaners can reduce exposure in indoor environments, with greater reduction in exposure occurring when in combination with universal masking. Again, a layered mitigation approach. We know that the best place for children is in the classroom. We can all agree on this. However, the disruptive quarantine, isolation, in and out of the classroom, when is it safe, who is it safe to sit with, and all of the other issues that come along with that has been proving very distressing and anxiety-inducing for many students. We've learned so much after the past year. The CDC and the Maricopa County Public Health updated their guidelines for when a student is considered a close contact and who needs to quarantine in K through 12 schools. A student would not be considered a close contact if that student is within 3 to 6 feet of another student and both students were engaged in consistent and correct use of well-fitting masks. This does not apply to adults, just the students, but neither of them would be in quarantine. I want to thank you all for the ownership and attention to protecting the health and safety of the children and families you serve. Throughout the past month, I can honestly say I'm extremely proud to be a parent of Madison students. Thank you for bringing in batch testing so we can take care of our community and prevent asymptomatic spread. Thank you for always prioritizing learning in the classroom. Thank you for utilizing science to make decisions for what's best for the Madison community. Thank you all.
Thank you. Rachel Dethridge?
Hello again, Superintendent Baca and Madison Governing Board. So it's been 2 weeks back to school, and as of this morning at least, there was 58 cases that are either resolved or active in our school district. So I would actually regard this as a success in comparison to other districts with no measures. Right. And I want to thank you for what you've already done for our students and our community at large. And I urge you to continue to enact these measures that are going to protect our students' ability to attend in school person safely, or as safe as we can. So if true universal masking is mandated, which again I urge you to do, we will continue to keep seeing that the transmission is down in our schools, and it will allow for in-person learning as long as possible. One unmasked case of COVID-19 has far more risk of illness, quarantine, loss of learning compared to a masked case of COVID-19. Some models are already predicting 70 to 90% of students, of unvaccinated students, which is our students, will have COVID-19 by the end of the year in an unmasked situation. Universal masking brings that down to 20 to 30%, but it's certainly not zero. And even according to the University of Arizona data, rates of COVID in children are now surpassing the rates of other older groups for the first time in pandemic history. It has not happened in the last 18 months. It's happening now. And fellow Madison parent and critical care physician Dr. Feldman also let me know that our state is now out of several monoclonal antibodies that they use in the ICU to treat people. And so now we're back to steroids and ventilators. So when you and I get sick, we're back to what we had months and months ago. The miracle treatments are not limitless. Our positivity rate in our state really shows that we're not testing enough. So while the cases that are being reported might look like they're going down, which I hope that the rate of rise isn't as much, we really can't say, because the positivity rate suggests that we're just not testing enough. So every decision we make and every person involved in this community really counts. Layered approaches to combat COVID-19 are necessary. So on top of universal masking, on top of distancing, hygiene, air quality is the next big one. Outdoor air is of course preferred. We'd love to open the windows and the doors, but this isn't possible in our buildings. We'd love to put Hepa and MERV 13 filters in our HVAC, but it's not built for that. So then we turn to the portable Hepa filters, which thank you so much for saying that those are now in our cafeterias. I hope they're turned on. I hope they're having those 6 air exchanges per hour, but that's wonderful. And it is the CDC and their Morbidity and Mortality Weekly that did report an up to 90% reduction when using portable HEPA filters, not even the HVAC, portable HEPA filters with masking, which is a fantastic reduction. So air quality improvement, it's not going to just benefit us now in the pandemic, it's going to move forward. This is an investment for our students and the air quality for our students. I believe that it should be instituted right away in the highest risk area. So the cafeteria, yes, absolutely. But also the shared classrooms, art, music, gym. Thank you for the music classroom as well. Libraries and the like. Really, it should be in every room if possible. It's a mitigation measure that's going to benefit the entire school. And I would, again, thank you for already instituting that in many ways. I'm already asking our SIMUS PTA and hopefully our parents at large to help to kind of crowdsource the funding for this so that we can get it into the rest of our classrooms. And I do believe that continuing to ask for measures like this are going to keep my kids and all of the kids in school longer with less interruption, ideally without getting sick, until we can get a vaccine, which really may not be until next year. Thank you so much for your time and your consideration.
All right, on to item 6.1. of the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All right. I have a motion by Mr. Holcomb and a second by Ms. Chris, or the other way around. Please vote. The consent agenda has been approved. Now on to item 7.1, K-8 remote learning. Unless a board member would like discussion on this, this is reflective of the public hearing, and if I'm not mistaken, we're just ratifying the presentation and our decision related to our K-8 learning model.
Mr. Chair, if there is no other discussion, I'd like to propose a motion.
You may.
I move that we approve the instructional time model for remote learning.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion made by Ms. Kazi, seconded by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. All right, on to item 7.2, new administrator evaluation instrument. Dr. Baca, will you introduce this item?
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. As you know, we have developed a strategic plan with our goals, our focus areas, our values and behavior statements that will guide everything that we do. And part of the important things that we must do is embedded into all that we do, especially in terms of our evaluations for our staff. So tonight I ask Ms. Marshall to go ahead and present the site administration evaluation rubric for your approval. And I've asked her to go through the process of what they did to be able to get to this point of recommending the new evaluation tool. Ms. Marshall?
Thank you. Vice President Osborne, members of the governing board, and members of executive team. As someone mentioned earlier, just keeping that focus on teaching and learning really rejuvenates us and helps us live that vision and mission that we have. So it was great to put together a committee where we could focus on expectations that are aligned to our strategic plan that will help move our schools forward. Next slide. So last spring, we put together a committee, mostly of the principals and assistant principals at the school, because obviously this impacts them the most, as it will be the rubric that is used as part of their evaluation and their growth model. And then there were also key members of the educational services team and Dr. Lomeli from Human Resources, who made sure that we met all the legal requirements for a principal evaluation. Dr. Connie Cam worked with us to provide research on various models that were out and about, and really helped guide us toward what you see as the final product for the rubric. So just a little background, the current evaluation that's being used for the site administrators is a system that Madison adapted from the TAP rubric. And the TAP rubric was developed back in the early 2000s. 2001 was its first year of implementation. It was actually a partnership with ASU and the Milk and Family Foundation. A lot of great things that are part of the TAP rubric, but we did modify it for site administrators, and you can see that there has been a lot that's changed in education over the past 20 years. So the other thing that we looked at are the professional standards for educational leaders. These were first published in 1996, but updated in 2008, and then there was a major revision that was done in 2015. So when we look at that revision of the professional standards, referred to as the P cells, you can see that it aligns to our strategic plan in a lot of ways. that first bullet point where it emphasizes the relationships in teaching and learning, the direction that Madison has gone, stressing the importance of academic rigor as well as support and care of students that's required for them to excel. It's a future-oriented perspective. It's something that would inspire educational leaders, and then having those interdependent domains, qualities, and values of leadership. All of this speaks to the strategic plan that we're developing. So what we did was took all of the PCEL standards, and the committee broke each of the indicators down from those standards and categorized them where we thought they fell in relation to our strategic plan, and had the 4 goal areas of the strategic plan. And it just was a natural flow for the committee that those goal areas become the areas of focus on the evaluation rubric. So all of the PCEL standards were identified and laid out. There was overlap, of course, in a couple areas, sometimes all 4 areas where a standard could be covered. And so then the committee looked to see where they felt it would best align. And so using that thematic coding, they then identified themes that were in the standards that for the state accountability performance categories that are needed. Then from there, we developed elements and indicators, and this was done at the committee level. But then through our instructional leadership team meetings, we brought the draft to the entire site administrative team. You saw from the group that was on the committee, we had 6 site administrators representing 5 of our 8 schools. But we took that draft copy to all the site administrators to get feedback from them, and then took that feedback to develop what became the final version here. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and we would like to pilot that for this year. So with your approval, we'll continue to move forward with aligning a shared understanding of what the rubric means, evidence pieces that would be collected, and just further aligning it to the strategic plan.
We have questions.
Yes,
Holcomb.
if I may. One of the things that's important in developing our strategic plan is making a good working document that works well. It sounds like I was looking at this with the alignment of what the standards are to our strategic plan. It was good, but how did the strategic, was the strategic plan that we've adopted to date, was that a good working document for you to be able to go through this process? I mean,
Yes, Mr. Holcomb and members of the board, it absolutely was, because what we found in researching how other districts across the country had implemented those PCELs and developed their rubrics, they developed thematics areas as well. And as we laid it out, we saw that those thematic areas were exactly the 4 goal areas that we had developed. And so it just naturally led to why try to create different thematic areas for us when they were already laid out in the strategic plan.
and I think it's important for the community to know too that Dr. Kemp was instrumental in us adopting our strategic plan as well, and very deeply involved.
Yes, she obviously facilitated that strategic plan as well as this committee. And so as Dr. Baca shared earlier, just one example of how we're starting to action out the strategic plan so that it is a living document and it guides the work that we're doing in the district.
Thank you.
Ms. Kazi.
Thank you. So the job of principal is obviously very complex, as evidenced by this very complex rubric. I was just curious if you could walk us through the deployment of it. How, who is involved in the process? Do principal or the, administrators who are being measured by this rubric receive input from a variety of sources? Like, can you walk me through a little bit of a better understanding
Ms.
what
Kazi?
that looks like?
Yeah, Ms. Kazi, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team, if I'll take that question. We've developed a system by where it's not just me as the superintendent supervising the principals that evaluates. I take input from our deputy superintendent, Ms. Garvey, and our assistant superintendent, Ms. Marshall. We meet together. along with the principal in a collaborative fashion, first to set goals for the year, to go through the evaluation instrument, to be able to talk about the areas and how they are aligned with their goals. Then we have, after that pre-conference, post-conference in terms of around in April or May, to go ahead and discuss where they are with meeting their goals and where we see them in these different areas. As the superintendent, I don't get into a lot of the areas that Ms. Garvey oversees or that Ms. Marshall oversees. So I need their input, guiding it with the principal's input and conversations that we have to really determine exactly where we feel they are. The principals themselves also do a self-assessment, as does my executive team, to say, okay, tell me where you feel you are. Let's see where we have shown where you are. And then we come to an understanding of where it should be. So the final piece of that evaluation is me sitting down with the principal, agreeing to what we already know is going to be the score and their evaluation, have further discussion, and then sign off on it. So we're approaching this in a way that it's supposed to help improve performance, as opposed to, I gotcha, or you're doing great. It's, what can we do to utilize this to be able to improve the performance that we all can improve on? And hopefully by modeling that as an example of how we would expect that our administrators also evaluate the people that they're responsible for.
So, to that point, and then
Thank you.
so let me make sure I'm clear, because I think one of my general concern and is it's a very long rubric, and so things get washed out potentially. Everything in there is good stuff, but I think you run that risk. So when you evaluate, let's take Ms. Rodriguez as an example. You would set, following year, you say, here are the things for this upcoming year we want you to focus in on. That's one part of the evaluation. And then the second piece is this rubric, or do you blend them, or, how does that kind of work so you have a cohesive approach?
Sure, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board, it's a combination of all of that. For the most part, yes, they're blended together. I would hope that the goals are centered around the work that's being done in the schools, and that this as a rubric guides that work as well. So I look at it not just as a way of assessing or for them to self-assess, but as a way to guide in terms of what does it really look like when we say you're highly effective. That's why it looks a little bit long and cumbersome. It's just getting into the detail of describing what highly effective means. In the end, I think by doing it in a collaborative fashion, we build that trust and relationship and hold each other accountable, because part of Ms. Garvey and Ms. Marshall and my job is to support those individuals in reaching their goals and in improving their performance. And that's the other conversation we have is what can we do to help you achieve and improve.
Go ahead, and I'll let you finish your this question.
I just have a quick comment. I also like that we're using the strategic plan. It's not just check the box and we did it and we're done. And I also want to emphasize that there's the wellness portion, and that we have social and emotional learning, and also emotional and physical well-being as part of this. I think that's very important, especially for principals, that to set the stage for that at each school. So that's it. Thank you.
And if I may just expand on one other thing, I think when we have our site visits, because we go and visit the sites, there are times where if there's an area that we can discuss that area and the goals that they're working on. So it's not just those formal meetings that we have as a group. It's also the times we go out and discuss with and do our school visits where we have that opportunity to discuss if need be.
Ms. Spear, any comments, questions?
No comments, other than thank you to my fellow board members for, no questions, just thank you for the questions that previous board members have asked. I've been able to listen and follow along. Thank you.
So, just kind of a thought, and I like the structure. I think as we implement this, I want to make sure that there's good quantitative, where appropriate discussions, and that the principals have a and the administrators have a very clear path of how to improve and progress. And I think it's particularly important because we're going to have a new superintendent coming in. And the first thing, most likely, that superintendent's going to do is look at these evaluation and consult with all the teams. So I think we need to, if it's done well, it will be a very effective tool. If it's done poorly, where I've seen a lot of great measures and then the evidence is weak, we'll just make sure we are aggressive in utilizing this tool in terms of its use. But
And to your point, if we integrate it with everything that we do, especially tied and embedded with the strategic plan, if we start doing that with our school reports, if we start continuing to do that with everything that we do, it's the living, breathing document that we want in terms of more than just words, but it's an action.
yeah, Ms. Kazi.
I just want to add that I love the transparency. I mean, again, I think what is measured or budgeted or fill in the blank is what is important in organizations. And I feel like we are, by having a clear rubric, yeah, it's long, but the principal's job is incredibly complex. Every single day, I'm sure you have no idea what you're going to walk into, and it can change in a moment. And so I think that as a result, it needs to reflect a number of different components of that position, as well as being obviously a leader of a very large organization. So I love the transparency. I love that we are clear up front and also tied to our strategic plan on what highly effective looks like. What fill in the blank for the rest of the grading levels. So thank you for all your work on this. It obviously was a lot of work, and it's impressive.
Oh, Mr.
Yeah, just a question. We do have Mr. Rodriguez here. I'm not going to make this in every meeting, maybe twice every meeting, but putting you on the spot. But you're involved with the other side of this evaluation. I mean, how do you feel about the evaluation and its usefulness? Particularly, Dr. Baca said this is one of the major goals of this is to help build the improvement and establish what can be done even better.
Mr. Holcomb, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board, Dr. Baca, and executive team. I'm looking forward to utilizing the new evaluation rubric. I was not on the committee, so I haven't had an opportunity to look through it in detail, just the section that I was assigned to as part of ILT to reflect on. But from what I saw, it seems like it'll be meaningful and provide us some good feedback to see how we can improve as principals.
And once again, it is the pilot. We pilot it. Are we going to have to make adjustments? More than likely we will. Hopefully not too many. But that's the purpose of this, is to be able to at least have a starting point. Let's pilot it and move on from there.
And Dr. Baca, when you say we're piloting it, this is the measure. We're not going to do the old measure. We're first draft. We'll see how it works, modify it, but this is what the principals are going to be evaluating.
That's correct. For the most part, it's going to, it will be what it is, just in terms of there may need to be some more clarity in some areas. But pretty much, I think the way in which the committee designed it, it's pretty much what it is. But we still want to use this year as a pilot to make sure that we are correct in that assessment.
And then going forward, and I'm not suggesting this for the next immediate round of school reports, but I think we should blend our presentations so they follow a similar, probably more focused approach, so that you evaluate the principals, we evaluate the success of the school, all the way up consistent with the strategic plan. And I think that's going to be the kind of leap forward in terms of really strategically managing. But I'm not suggesting we do that with this go around, because I know it's short. I think it's something maybe we should talk as a future board agenda item of, out of the strategic plan, what do we want, or have recommendations come out. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
I need a motion.
Oh, yes. Do I have a motion?
A motion to adopt the new administrative evaluation instrument as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion proposed by Mr. Holcomb, seconded by Ms. Kazi. Please vote. The motion passes. On to item 7.3, superintendent search firms to be interviewed. Dr. Baca, will you explain this item?
Sure. Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team, I want to thank you for individually reviewing the proposals that were submitted. As you know, there are 3 that were submitted. You did your own scoring individually, and tonight I shared with you the compiled scores in regard to where each of the 3 you've assessed their proposals initially. The next step will be to be able to have the opportunity to interview and hear from the 3 firms that have submitted if you choose to move the 3 forward. The advantage of doing that is sometimes when somebody you talk with and listen to and engage with, it may highlight something that wasn't missing in the written document. And sometimes you hear from those folks and say, well, it doesn't align with what you submitted, so do I need to make any adjustments? So with that said, you have the scores that I compiled on your behalf, individually, now collective, for you to determine if you want 1, 2, or all 3 to move forward to meet on the 30th for that interview.
So I'll open it up for discussion, and maybe we start out just to throw some out as a suggestion that we invite all 3 firms to do a 20-minute presentation with 10 minutes-ish for Q&A, if that seems fair. I'm happy to make it longer or shorter, but that seems like a reasonable amount of time. And
for clarification, Dr. Osborne, what we shared with them is there's going to be the opportunity to have a discussion with the board, interview if they have a presentation. Would you like for me to request that they do a formal presentation for you?
I think it would be up to them, but I would suggest that we've all read the proposals, so we don't need 5-10 minutes on the background, but focus stuff that would help us distinguish themselves and how they want to do that, case studies or ways they've worked with other firms, and I think the other thing is if there's some questions, my recommendation would be if there's some questions that the board generally would like them to address, we could get them to them at some period that would be reasonable for them to respond. That's just a suggestion to throw that out there.
And I would like to, I don't know if my fellow board members would concur with me on this, but I would love to hear from them on 2 really important specific areas. I want them to be cognizant of the way that we have selected a superintendent previously, because I think that process worked well, but we obviously need support. But it's probably not going to be the same as what they've done before, in my sense. I think we probably want to be more involved in the process than maybe some of the other boards they've worked with. And I think that there should be some understanding of that. Secondly, given that the environment of the churn in the superintendent field in this state and likely in other states, I really want to know what they're going to do to deal with that very real challenge in finding highly qualified candidates. Because in Madison, we really need a really good superintendent to replace Dr. Baca. And there's just so much change in this position statewide that the pool might not be what we hope it to be right now.
Dr. Osborne?
Dr. Baca, go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Osborne, Ms. Causey, members of the board and executive team, what I would suggest is that to make sure you tailor your questions around those 2 points for them to be able to respond to, and you'll get authentic answers in terms of how they do it. So just my suggestion as you conduct those interviews, rather than having a set of questions, you can dig deeper, and if you're not getting what you're trying to get from the firms, that should give you information that would be useful in making your selection.
Mr. Holcomb.
Yes, thank you. I agree with that. We should interview all 3 because it really does fill in for just having a proposal. We need to get, this is going to be a very important relationship. It's a very important decision we're making here. I also think not a long presentation, but I think a short presentation. And I don't want to, at least in my mind, my initial thought is I don't want to tell them what to put in the presentation. I want them to bring forward what's important. Why should we choose you over someone else? What is it you bring to the table? Because I think what they select to do that. We don't need to hear the response, the response to the RFQs again. It's what they think is important to us, and I think that helps show a lot as to what they decide to present.
The other thing that's important to me is it be made very crystal clear that those who are presenting are the ones that we're going to be working with.
Yeah, absolutely. That's I do that in all of the government RFQs that I do. Says we actually don't allow, if the only people allowed in the room are those who are going to be working on the project for us, and we actually do it. We do the interviews at their location as well. We can't do that here, but I think that's a very important point.
Can we also make sure they know that we've read the presentations? Because I don't know if that's the norm, but be clear that we know everything. We don't need to have a rehash.
Ms. Gresham.
I concur with everything the rest of the board members said, and I also just for the other board members, the community involvement is a big one for me. So I would love to hear more about that from them too. Thank you.
Ms. Spear, any thoughts, comments?
I don't have very much original to say, except that I am very much interested in how they would be able to address superintendents in Arizona. Specifically, our educational landscape is very different than many other states. And I am concerned about finding a quality candidate that is able to deftly maneuver the myriad of issues that are presented within Arizona, be it funding or curriculum or legislative activity. I'm very concerned that we find somebody who's able to be nimble and have the depth to really figure out how to proceed, knowing obviously that the strategic plan is an influencing and guiding force.
Excellent.
I think interviewing all three candidates is a good idea, and I think that them going over their submittals to us is not a worthy use of their time, and I would like it to be a little bit more of a Q&A opportunity, presuming that we would be asking the same questions of each firm in order for it to be fair.
So just to be clear in terms of the guidance for Dr. Baca, 3 firms, presentations, but more on the dialogue basis, principals or client servicing folks only. And then, I'm open to just, if there's broad topics that we want to make sure they touch on, feel free as board members to forward those to Dr. Baca. And then I think also to Scott's point, we'll see what they come prepared with and kind of go from there.
If I may, to Ms. Spear's point, I think there are things that we want to see from each of them, but I don't want to have, personally, I don't want to have canned questions. I mean, we have areas, but as I think Dr. Baca mentioned this, and I think it's very important, this needs to be a dialogue, so we need to be very flexible. This is something where we really need to dig into the relationship and what we're getting.
Okay.
And so I don't want to be limited to canned questions or thinking about that, or having to ask the same questions to all of them. It's not a question of fairness, it's a question of responding to what they're giving us.
Mr. Holcomb, my idea would be just say, in your presentation, these are topics that the board generally thinks you should cover, and then I think we'll be free, and I agree with you, to go in different directions. And since, I think other than Mr. Holcomb, none of us have hired search firms before. I don't know, Ms. Kazi, if you have, so this is a little bit of a new venture for me. So, Dr. Baca, do you have enough guidance from the board?
I do believe. I do. All 3 search firms, you're going to vote, but presuming that your vote reflects this, all 3 firms are going to be asked to take the first 10-15 minutes for a presentation of their proposals, followed by the board asking questions. The board also asks that the people who will be working the search are the people who present on Monday, and to make sure that they know that the board has read the proposals in depth. The first search firm would be interviewed at 8:30 a.m., second one at 9:15, and then the third one at 10. That gives you 45 minutes. Half an hour could be the presentation, question and answers, and then 15 minutes of time for you to discuss each one individually. If you go the full 45 minutes, you can reserve that to a later discussion once all three have presented.
I,
Does that work for everybody?
I'm not sure that 45 minutes is enough. If 15 minutes of that is our discussion in between, particularly if we have a presentation and the question. Again, I don't want to rush this process. But I'm all open. If you think that's enough,
I want them to be, I don't want a big sales job. I feel the more time we give them, the more they're going to be verbose.
Yeah, it's like,
Maybe we have their presentation a little shorter and leave more time for us to ask questions. Would that?
so maybe,
I would prefer that as well, to have more time for question and answer. And in terms of the questions, Mr. Holcomb, my idea is just general themes, so that they understand what our primary concern, what our pressure points are.
yeah, I think when we utilize Dr. Baca's kind of schedule, if we're efficient in one of them and feel good and don't need the full, then we can discuss right after. But I think since we're doing all in rapid succession, if we end up kind of running long with a lot of dialogue, then we can have that discussion at the end of the three, and that way we don't feel, and if we need to cue them back 15 minutes or whatever, you just let them know that they're going to have to be a little bit.
And Dr. Osborne, members of the board, we also have the agenda that will be published that doesn't have the specific times, so you can take as much time or as little time as you need.
And we know what big attendance we always get at our retreats.
Mr. Chair, can I move that we approve the guidance that Dr. Baca just shared with us? Is that sufficient?
No, if you can approve the firms, so if
Okay,
you...
so I move that we approve the three search firms to be interviewed: Arizona School Board Association, McPherson. Yes.
I will second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Please vote. And in explaining my vote, I think those interviews are to be conducted consistent with the feedback provided by the board. And with that, I vote aye. The motion is approved, and we'll go on to item 8.1.
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. Now that you have approved our instructional time model, we must revise our policy IC to reflect the new parameters that have been given to us in being able to provide enough instructional time through the flexibility of in-person and remote learning. So we've updated that policy to reflect our instructional time model. And we did it in consultation with ASBA, as well as modifying a bit to fit our needs, especially in terms of when we adopt calendars. So with that, we're here to answer any questions. We're asking that you approve this as a first and second read. Our board policy allows for you to adopt policies as a first and second rather than going through the normal first read in one meeting and second in the next.
Any questions, comments, or discussion? Given that we kind of adopted this new model on the fly, I'm supportive of doing that, but as I always say, let's not make this a habit of first and second reading on top of each other. But in this case, I think it is warranted. Do I have a motion?
I move that we adopt policy IC for the instructional time model.
The motion's been made, Ms. Gresham. Do I have a second?
Yeah,
Ms. Kazi.
no.
Second by Ms. Kazi. Please vote. All right, the motion passes. Item 9.1, future meetings. Dr. Baca, you want to introduce this item?
Thank you, Dr. Osborne, members of the governing board and executive team. As you know, Monday, August 30th will be our study session from 8 until 2, focused on the interviews for the superintendent search firm, followed by our strategic plan update, which Dr. Kim, along with the executive team, will be joining us at that time to go ahead and discuss that with you. And then we will have an action item. We don't normally on a study session, but because we need to move forward with the selection of the firm, you will take a vote to select one of those 3 firms. On September 14th, you can see we don't have much in terms of information items or action items. I anticipate that might change. And then just finally, moving forward into 2 board meetings after that, we start our school reports, starting with our elementary schools on September 28th, followed on October 12th by the school reports from our middle schools and our K-8 school, Madison Traditional Academy. Those will be held at the Madison number 1 library, where we used to have them. We tried to get the Madison Center for the Arts, but they were booked, so we're going to be over there for those study sessions.
Questions, suggestions from anybody? All righty. Anything else of note on the calendars, Dr. Baca?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. Then I will accept motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Mr.
Second.
Holcomb, seconded by Ms. Gresham. Please vote. The motion has been approved. And this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.